to know how to live the way God intended? Then this podcast series is tailor-made for you. David Taviner asks Bible expert Mike Beaumont why Jesus spoke about living God's way using parables. And Mike will sum up what this means for us today in just 3 words.
Here we are looking at Jesus' parable of the Good Shepherd and his sheep. And unusually, we're actually not going to be in Matthew's Gospel, or indeed Mark's Gospel, or Luke's Gospel, but John's Gospel. Does John have many parables?
Well, that's a really good question, and perhaps there'll be some listeners whose ears are pricking up, because traditionally we've been told that John doesn't have parables. Only the synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, have parables. So why are we looking at a parable in a book that doesn't have parables? Well, my answer is, does John have parables? Well, yes and no. It depends what you mean by a parable. He certainly doesn't have parables in the classic form that they're found in the synoptic gospels, either punchy one-liners or a short, punchy story with one main point. And John, in his Greek text, never actually uses the word parable, parabole, in Greek, which is why it's traditional to say there aren't parables in John. But John does have what he calls, in Greek, paroima. And that word is a little bit wider. It meant a figurative saying, an allegory, a pictorial saying, a proverb. So something in picture language. And John has a huge amount of picture language and imagery, the vast majority of which is rooted in the Old Testament. And in fact, all 7 of Jesus's signs and sayings, the I am statements, are paroimia. They're picture language. So I would say, well, he does have parables, but just by a different name and with a sort of slightly different slant.
Where are we sort of on the timeline in terms of what's happening in the life of Jesus?
Well, we've seen in our journey through the synoptics and largely through Matthew, whose eyes we've primarily been looking through, that much of Jesus's ministry happened in Galilee among the ordinary people. Now, John is talking to us about the same Jesus and the same message and the same gospel, but John focuses on something slightly different in his gospel. And a lot of John's gospel is set not in Galilee, but in Jerusalem.
Oh, down south.
Yeah. Now, we do know, don't we, from the synoptics that Jesus visited Jerusalem. And as a good Jew, he would have visited at least 3 times a year for the 3 great festivals that required all Jewish men to go to the temple. And John sort of zooms in often on those visits to the temple. Why? Because they highlight some of the clashes between Jesus and the religious leaders. Now, we've clearly seen some of that, haven't we? Particularly about Sabbath and more recently about ritual hand washing. But there were other bigger clashes, and a lot of those happened not up in Galilee, but when Jesus went to Jerusalem. So where is he for the parable we're looking at in John 10? Well, back in chapter 7, he's in Jerusalem and he's gone there for the Feast of Tabernacles, one of these 3 great festivals. And he's been teaching in chapter 8, and he's just healed a blind man on the Sabbath, in chapter 9. And of course, once again, as we become accustomed to, the Pharisees and religious leaders are up in arms because he's healed someone on the Sabbath. And today's picture that we're looking at, today's parable, is part of Jesus's answer and challenge to the Pharisees about, why are you getting so uptight about my healing people on the Sabbath? And his answer is because you're blind. That's how it ends chapter 9. He accuses them of spiritual blindness. You can't see who I am and what I've come to do and what and who I have come to be. Now remember, there are no chapter and verse divisions. in the original Bible. So this picture that we're going to be looking at now in chapter 10 flows straight on from his response to the Pharisees who were investigating this Sabbath healing and his accusation of them, they who ought to be true leaders, of being utterly spiritually blind and just leading other people in their blindness.
So interestingly, chapter 10 of John's Gospel starts by saying, these are the words of Jesus, "Very truly I tell you, Pharisees."
Yeah, and I just need to jump in at this point because some readers will perhaps be following in their Bibles and won't find the word Pharisees there. And what's happened here is we're using the latest edition of the NIV, is the Bible translators have slipped that word Pharisees in to try and make clear who it is that Jesus is talking to. Why? Because it follows straight on from the fact that he's been addressing them in chapter 9. But actually the Greek simply says here, "Very truly I tell you that," but the text in the NIV has opened it up, the you, and by the way, remember, he's still talking to the Pharisees and religious leaders at this moment.
So Jesus says, "Very truly I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all of his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice." Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus said again, "Very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they might have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down on my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father." And the next couple of verses say, "The Jews who heard these words were again divided. Many of them said, 'He is demon-possessed and raving mad. Why listen to him?' But others said, 'These are not the sayings of a man possessed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind?'" So quite different reactions then to that parable.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the ravings of a lunatic. Others, hang on, it can't be, can it? We've just seen, way back in chapter 9, we've just seen him heal a man. So, yeah, mixed reactions here from what John calls the Jews. The Jews is a term that John uses as a sort of shorthand, really meaning the Jewish religious leaders.
Okay.
The priests, the scribes, the rabbis, the religious dignitaries and bigwigs. So wherever you see the Jews, it doesn't mean all the Jews. It's John's way of writing about the Jewish religious leaders, and particularly those who were opposed to him.
So some of those Pharisees or whoever who were listening to him didn't understand it.
Yeah, they think it's crazy. But others say, well, it's at least worth thinking about, isn't it, because of what we've just seen him doing.
Again, a very vivid picture Jesus is painting using everyday terms.
Yeah. As we've seen repeatedly in our series, Jesus uses pictures from everyday, ordinary life of first century Palestine, of ordinary people, not highfalutin philosophical arguments, but picture language from the life of every day. And we've said many times before that this picture of sheep and shepherds, very, very common. Keeping sheep was one of the major industries in Israel in those days. And we've said before that most families would have the odd sheep or two anyway, or goat for the milk. So very, very common, this idea of a sheep and a shepherd, but not just culturally common, scripturally common. Because any good Jew would know that this picture of Israel as the flock and God as their shepherd who cares for them, and this idea of there being good and bad under shepherds on God's behalf. One of the great passages about that is actually Ezekiel chapter 34, where God rebukes Israel's leaders for having failed to be good under shepherds. He's the great shepherd, but they were called to be under shepherds, and he rebukes them. Why? Because their total focus and energy has been on looking after, number one, caring for themselves as under shepherds rather than caring for the sheep. And there's a powerful picture in Ezekiel 34 where God says, do you know what? Because you failed to do it, then one day I myself will come and do it. I myself will come as that good shepherd. And it's that scripture passage in particular that Jesus is picking up here. So it's both a common picture from life all around, but it's also common knowledge out of scripture. In fact, do you know what? I'm even going to read just a few verses of Ezekiel 34 because it is so powerful. And having chastised them for not caring, in Ezekiel 34 verse 11, we read, "For this is what the sovereign Lord says, therefore I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. As a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he's with them, so will I look after my sheep. I will rescue them from all the places where they were scattered on a day of clouds and darkness. I will bring them out from the nations and gather them from the countries. I will bring them into their own land. I will pasture them on the mountains of Israel, in the ravines and in all the settlements of the land. I will tend them in good pasture, and the mountain heights of Israel will be their grazing land. There they will lie down in good grazing land, and there they will feed in a rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. I myself will tend my sheep and have them lie down, declares the sovereign Lord. I will search for the lost and bring back the strays. I will bind up the injured and strengthen the weak, but the sleek and the strong I will destroy. I will shepherd the flock with justice." So what Israel's under-shepherds, religious leaders, have failed to do, God prophesies there through Ezekiel, a day's coming when I will come as the good shepherd and do these things. And Jesus is picking up that prophetic picture. So he's using both an everyday picture and a scriptural promise. And he's daring to come and say, you know, back in the Old Testament, where God prophesied through Ezekiel that one day God would come as the good shepherd to his people. Well, here he is. I'm the good shepherd. I'm the gate. I'm the one who's come to care for the sheep. Why? Because you lot who think so highly of yourselves just won't do it.
So these Pharisees who were living amongst everyone and supposedly setting an example, there was an expectation on them to be shepherds.
Yeah, absolutely. But what they were sort of nitpicking provokers of people. There wasn't any care in their heart. All they cared about was that people kept their rules, all their many rules that they and the rabbis had added on to the scriptures originally. That's all they cared about. Why are you carrying your mat on the Sabbath? They said to this guy who for years had lain crippled by the pool. Not, wow, what's happened? No. First, why are you carrying your mat and doing something on the Sabbath that is unlawful? That's all they cared about. Keeping their rules. Because they felt it was by keeping their rules that eventually God would send his Messiah and save Israel. So they cared about their rules, not about people. And Jesus is saying here, look, the heart of a good shepherd is that he cares for his sheep, in huge contrast to the attitude that they were showing.
And in using the description of himself as the good shepherd, he's setting himself against other shepherds.
Yes, I think he's doing two things. First, by implication, he's highlighting to them that you have not been good shepherds. You have not done what was needed for God's people. And then, of course, he's going back to the Old Testament. Many scriptures. I just read one. Psalm 23 is another well-known one, isn't it? Where God is the good shepherd. So not only is he setting himself up against the uncaring attitude of these religious leaders, for anyone with ears to hear, he's also claiming to be that promised good shepherd who would one day come, no one less than God himself.
And what is he saying through this parable about the damage that they've created by not being good shepherds?
Well, they've caused huge damage, haven't they? All who've come before me are thieves and robbers by not caring for sheep. What have you allowed to happen? Now, come on, let's look at the wider picture rather than the meaning of it. Why do you need a shepherd with sheep? Why do you need a sheep pen to bring the sheep in? To protect the sheep. What is a good shepherd protecting sheep from? Number one, thieves, bad people who want to come and take what's not theirs. Number two, wild animals who would come against you. And so they have just failed to do that. They failed to protect the flock. And he just dismisses them as, all who've come before me are thieves and robbers. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. Wow, that's three powerful pictures of what the devil is always looking to do, by the way, whether directly or through people that he uses, to steal, to rob us of what is ours by right in God. To kill, not just literally physically, but to kill stuff in us and to destroy. Whereas God wants to create, kill, steal, destroy, all the hallmarks of the evil one. And that was sadly the hallmark of these who were supposed to be religious leaders. They weren't laying down their life for the sheep. They weren't being what Jesus called here the gate. Switches the image there from being the shepherd to the gate. Is that a different picture? No, it's not. Because what would happen is, particularly in the evenings when the shepherds gathered the sheep into the sheepfold for that night, and the sheepfold would simply be, a circle of a pile of stones, this like a bit like a dry stone wall, like we often see in the northern parts of England today. They would make a pen for the sheep, tall enough that they couldn't leap out of, and then bring them in through the entrance, and then the shepherd himself would lie across the doorway so they couldn't get out at night. Mm-hmm. And so the shepherd would be the gate.
Oh.
So Jesus is saying here, how do we get into this sheepfold? How do we become part of it? Well, you have to come through me. Jesus is saying, I'm the gate. He'll say later in John, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. You have to come in through me. And if you try and come in any other way, he said at the beginning of the story, then anyone who tries to come any other way is frankly a thief and a robber, not the good shepherd. They're in it for what they can get for themselves, not what they can give to the flock. So Jesus is absolutely contrasting himself as the good shepherd, the fulfillment of that Old Testament promise that God himself would come, but contrasting himself with these self-seeking, self-serving religious leaders who simply wanted to use people. I mean, that's all the people were there for, was to do what they wanted them to do. Tick these boxes, behave like we behave, and then Messiah can come. There was no sense of laying down their life for the sheep. Did you notice that emphasis there in what Jesus says? The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Literally, that would have to happen. The shepherd at times would have to risk his life in chasing off a bear or a lion. And the good shepherd is someone who lays down his life for the sheep. He's in it to protect them. Of course, he's also looking ahead here to what would happen when he laid down his life for us on the cross, didn't he? What a contrast, he says there, to the hired hand. The labourer, the day labourer who's hired, he's not the shepherd. So the wolf comes, what does he do? Does he risk his own life? Not likely, they're not his sheep.
He runs off.
He's only getting paid a denarius a day anyway. It's not worth risking his life to save that rich bloke's sheep. But the bloke whose sheep they are, well, he's going to do everything he can. Why? Because they're his sheep. What a contrast between Jesus, who lays down his life for his sheep, who gives everything for them, and this self-serving, self-seeking religious elite who simply want to use people to serve them and their agenda.
I'm just thinking they're referred to as religious leaders, but they've got both religion and leadership wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. They got religion wrong because it's not supposed to be about religion. It's supposed to be about relationship. And they've got leadership wrong because it's not about leading. It's about serving. It's about laying down your life as Jesus himself modeled for us.
And this business about the Good Shepherd knowing his sheep, knowing each one, a very personal relationship.
Yes. And, we might think, how on earth did they do that? Well, I can tell you they do. And I've been in the Middle East and seen Middle Eastern shepherds who absolutely know their sheep and can identify them. Actually, I've seen shepherds here in England who do the same and can pick them out because one's got a little brown speck on one ear and one doesn't. It's amazing how shepherds can know their sheep in a way that me as just an onlooker can't. So Jesus is emphasizing a really good shepherd knows his flock. A really good shepherd knows his sheep. The hired hand, frankly, he doesn't care. So it's a picture about relationship. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. And my sheep hear my voice and they follow me. I call them and they come out after me. They won't follow other voices, but they recognize my voice. Is still true today. I mean, whether it's sheep or cows or whatever, you go and watch a farmer who goes out into the field, and he simply calls and his sheep or his cattle come to him. I try it, they completely ignore me because they know, this is the one who's going to take us back and we're going to get fed or whatever it might be. So this is about intimacy. It's about relationship. It is not about function. And the trouble is with the rabbis and the Pharisees who put their teaching into practice, it was functional. It was transactional. It was not relational. And Jesus is talking here about being that shepherd that Ezekiel had promised, who would come and get personally, intimately involved with his sheep. I find this so encouraging. You might feel, it's just little me. No, it's not just little you. If you're a follower of Jesus, Jesus knows you. He knows you by name. He knows you intimately. He's calling you to come and follow him. He cares about you. You are just not a number. For the UK government, I'm just a number. I've got a national insurance number. I've got a national health service number. Can't remember either. They're written down in my phone somewhere because they're so long and complicated. I'm a number that identifies me among millions, but not with God. I'm not a number. I'm a name. I'm a person. I'm a child. I'm a son of God. He knows me by name, and he calls me by name, and he leads me out by name, and he's ready to lay down his life for me. Wow, what a wonderful good shepherd I have.
And clearly this parable is very much one of contrast between Jesus, the good shepherd, and these religious leaders. I guess the people that should have been shepherded by these religious leaders wouldn't have really known the voice or indeed the name.
No, not at all. I mean, yeah, they would have known the names. They would have known who they are. But all they ever received from them was really harsh words, being put back into line, being constantly told what they had failed to do. I mean, even the very way that the Pharisees dressed, which Jesus addresses in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, 6, 7, and the way that they had these fabulous garments and very long garments with huge long prayer tassels. Now, Jewish men were supposed to wear a linen garment with prayer tassels at each corner, but they had hyper long ones as a way of saying, look at me, look how good I am, look how prayerful I am. Those phylacteries, those boxes with scripture that they tied to their heads and their arms when they prayed, they had huge ones so people could look and think, oh, how wonderful you are. They didn't care about people. They cared about reputation. And the only thing they cared about people for was getting them into line with their ways. That's not our good shepherd. Jesus cares about each of us intimately. He knows us by name, it says in that passage. He leads us out by name. He knows each one individually. He knows who we are, our strengths, our weaknesses, our hopes, our fears, our loves, our joys. He knows us intimately, and he wants us to know him and to follow him.
Why did he say then, I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen, I must bring them also?
Yeah, because of course, at this point still, who was seen as the people of God? Well, historically, who they had been throughout the Old Testament people, the Jewish people, or at least the Jewish believing people, I would want to say. So it was Israel, primarily. But Jesus here has a big vision. And when Jesus came into this world, he came into this world not just to save the Jews, but to save people of every tribe and tongue and language and nation, as it's summed up in the book of Revelation. So while his ministry, primarily and understandably during his own lifetime, had been to the Jews, he worked in a very small area, really, in a very small country. Just occasionally he reaches out beyond, like to the centurion's servant or to the Syrophoenician woman whose daughter he heals. But 99% of his ministry was to Jews during his lifetime. But that's not where it was intended to end. That was intended to be the base and foundation of reforming Israel, not around the law, but now around him and his person and his death and resurrection. And that reforming of Israel, in inverted commas, would now include both believing Jews and believing Gentiles. So just before Jesus returned to heaven, what do we find him saying in Acts chapter 1? You will be my witnesses when the Holy Spirit comes upon you. And you'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem and Judea. Okay, so far, still Jews. And Samaria. Okay, half Jews at least. Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria and the ends of the earth. That's why Jesus came. For men and women from every tribe and tongue and language and nation and colour and creed. And so he's looking ahead here at that point. I have other sheep who are not of this sheepfold yet, that I'll be laying my life down for too. So he's got a huge vision here in his heart.
And so is that why he goes on to say, they too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd?
Absolutely.
That's a message for you and me.
Yeah, absolutely. And a message too that God has never intended there to be two flocks. A plan through Israel and a plan through the church. And there have been various Christian theologies that have tried to work things out that way. One flock, one shepherd. One flock made up of believing Jews and believing Gentiles. And here's the great thing, David, you and I are included in that one flock, living under that one shepherd today. I mean, this is exciting. This is wonderful. We who were once excluded, outsiders, are now invited in. And the promises that God made in the Old Testament to come and shepherd his people are now broadened to include you and me. He invites us to become his sheep. How? Through believing in him, trusting in him, entering the sheepfold through him, the gate, finding his provision and protection and blessing and security and leading. And the heart of it all, the challenge out of this is, hey, keep following the shepherd. Follow the shepherd to find life. And then keep following the shepherd. Keep listening to his voice. And whatever he says to you, do it. Keep following the shepherd. Because it's in following the shepherd, not in following religion like the religious leaders wanted them to do, that we truly find life.
Bible expert Mike Beaumont explaining the parables of Jesus to David Taviner. Bible Parables in 30 Minutes is just one of a series of podcasts from Mike and David that help to make sense of the Bible, some of them recorded on location in the Holy Land and beyond. You can check them all out on the easy-to-use app UCB Player or wherever you listen to your podcasts.